This episode is sponsored by the Bridge to Recovery, a nonprofit program on 115 acres near Bowling Green, Kentucky, a tranquil place where they've been changing lives for over 40 years. Their people improve their quality of life by acknowledging past emotional wounds and healing from all forms of trauma. The CEO, Paul Hamlin, has been a friend of mine for 20 years. Call him directly at 858-945-7848. That's 858-945-7848. Or you can learn more about the Bridge to Recovery by clicking the link in the show notes or visiting thebridgetorecovery.com. Thank you for listening to The Path to Authenticity. My name's Tom Gentry. I think of this show as the opposite of small talk. You'll hear real conversations with real people who know who they are. We talk about what makes them who they are, how they became who they are, and how we might become truer expressions of who we are.
This is Michael Weiner, and this is The Path to Authenticity.
I'm Tom Gentry. Thanks for listening to The Path to Authenticity. This is the 30th episode of the show. It's the second part of my conversation with Dr. Michael Weiner, where we talk about addiction treatment, kind of where we are in that world right now. You know, it's hard for me to believe I've done 30 of these already, and I feel like the show's come a long way. And a clear example of how that has happened, a demonstration of that, is the fact that we have our first sponsor now. So beginning in the month of November, the show is going to be sponsored by a facility in Bowling Green, Kentucky called the Bridge to Recovery. It's been around for about 40 years. It's a workshop-style residential facility with programming that lasts around 2 weeks, sometimes longer depending on the situation. But it's all about helping people uncover their emotional wounds, heal from all forms of trauma and codependency, and, you know, to have a deeper, better, happier life. So I feel like it's a really great fit in terms of our missions. They're really consistent, and I'm happy that in addition to simply advertising, you know, I'm going to feature some of their staff members to talk about trauma, to talk about codependency, you know, as these things are all obstacles, you know, to our truest selves. They're obstacles to personal authenticity. So I'm really, really excited about that. And aside from that, I have some great guests coming up. You know, I have another author whose book I'm reading now, and I'll be talking to her in the very near future. I have a podcaster who I'm going to be featuring after I interview her next week. Some really cool stuff. So I appreciate you taking the time to listen, and hope you enjoy the rest of my conversation with Dr. Michael Weiner.
I didn't want to do it either, but because I did it, maybe you should.
Well, that's what I say. You know, nobody. I didn't want to do this.
Yeah.
I understand that you don't want to do this. I didn't want to do it either.
Right.
That's okay to feel that way. It doesn't mean you don't try.
Exactly.
And you find your people. You find where you fit.
Exactly.
That's what it's about.
And like
finding what works for you.
And what you said before, you know, you might find you're getting something from 12-step and something from Refuge, and you might really enjoy Celebrate Recovery. Mm-hmm. That's your program. That's your lifespan recovery.
Well, and listen, the truth is, I mean, you know, we don't have the corner on the market for this stuff. There are plenty of people who've quit drinking and gone to church
That's true.
for centuries.
Exactly.
Now, this is just our way of doing it. And so it's pretty narrow-minded to think that this is the only way.
But I think we can. Change takes time. And what you were saying before about when a patient asks you, they ask you, well, what's your success rate? Let's say a family. I think as long as you're in the treating this disorder, you're successful. Mm-hmm. A person who treats the disorder well for 12 years, and that person's done well. Mm-hmm. And let's say the symptoms recur. Okay, the job is what symptoms does this person have, and what level of care do those symptoms indicate? Mm-hmm. Person who's been abstinent for 12 years and picks up doesn't. Maybe they just need to get back into some one-on-one therapy. Mm-hmm. Maybe they just need detox and are working such a strong self-help recovery that maybe all they need is detox. Mm-hmm. Maybe they need, I could go on. Maybe they need detox plus a whole bunch of other services like maybe yoga or exercise. Or, but I think we do really well as professionals. Most of my neighbors think it's a waste of time. A lot of my neighbors come up and say, hey, how effective is that thing you do anyway? Like they already know. They read about the people who start using. We've set up a situation that guarantees failure. I look at that 12 guys had 12 years and picks up. That's fantastic. If total abstinence forever is your criteria, that guy who just had 12 years failed. And that's not good. Mm-hmm. And I guarantee it's going to make him or her less likely to come back into the rooms.
Well, I'll tell you, I got to be honest. I sit here listening to you, and I'm thinking, I celebrate 23 years in a few days.
Yeah.
If I picked up a drink, that would be fucking terrible.
Oh, it would be.
It would be terrible.
I would be crushed. And like I said, I'm talking this way, but I'm a product of the other way.
Me too.
And I find it, if I can talk to a person who's never come into getting well again, if I could start with that person, that's a good start. Mm-hmm. And one thing that I found, and you could try this with people, sometimes like at a high-end treatment facility, let's say something like Seaside, for example, a person might come to me and they just say, hey, this is my fourth treatment. And when I stop and explain to that person, well, not really. I mean, you were first treated, what was it, 15 years ago at this, Hazelton Equality Center, whatever, and you did real well. In fact, you used the tools for you did whatever you were supposed to do. But if I say to him that it's the same disease, you stayed abstinent, the place you went to the first time may not have put together the best discharge program for you, or perhaps you didn't follow it.
Well, but talk about another pet peeve.
Exactly.
I mean, that's like, there's a pretty good chance they didn't.
But you know why? Because it's called aftercare.
Right.
When they told me aftercare in 1983, I said, what? What? After what? After thought? No one ever creates the importance on what happens next. It's like what happens next may be more important than what just happened. Mm-hmm. When you look at the doctor studies and the pilot studies, great recovery rate for 5 years. Mm-hmm. Granted, some of those people need licenses and stuff. Mm-hmm. But those people perceive themselves to be in treatment for 5 years. The fifth year might be a semi-annual checkup. That's treatment. Mm-hmm. But so the intensity of treatment gradually diminishes. But I wonder what would happen if people if I continuously perceive myself as a person in treatment rather than thinking treatment is something I did so long ago.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we're...
Well, for me, in my career, well, first of all, I went to treatment for 30 days.
Me too.
And then was referred to a transitional living facility.
Oh, that was good.
Most people will call a halfway house.
Right.
And I lived there as a client for 9 months.
Yeah.
And then I stayed on as a resident manager for another 7 months.
Right.
So 16, 17 months.
Right.
I was in some sort of
care,
residential care.
Right.
And, but what clicked to me was, in treatment, I got the tools.
Right.
Everybody explained to me, this is what you need to do.
Right.
Now, you don't start doing that until you go back out into the world.
That's right.
That's when you implement those tools. And so that living in a transitional living facility is where I learned how to use all that stuff.
Correct.
And it hit me that, this is where the rubber hits the road.
Yeah.
This is where people really start getting better.
It's true.
And this is where, and so I've spent most of my career, at least when I've worked with clients, has been at that level of care. I mean, I just feel like it's just so, it's different. It's different and it's important. Not that primary treatment is any less important.
Oh, right.
But, what is it that, a lot of the guys who go to treatment 5-10 times, what they never do is the next thing. Well, I never followed recommendations to go.
Exactly.
And so that's really where it all starts
and it's
happening.
Even in the course of our conversation with like two old timers saying that we shouldn't do this anymore, but we keep doing it. Because most of the time when I say the word treatment, I'm thinking of residential.
Right.
Like if you say to a person, you need to go to treatment, you're not saying you really need to have a professional assessment and see what level of intensity or the intensity of care that you need. And, somebody could, a person who I've been kind of working with for a bit, who a month ago clearly needed withdrawal management and residential care. Let's say I spoke to this person recently, and during the course of that month, they weren't involved in any formal treatment program, but they stopped drinking.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe a month since I've seen them, let's do that assessment again. Where are you? You no longer need to be detoxed.
Right.
What are your medical issues, emotional issues? Are you motivated to do this? What's the risk of not doing it? What's your recovery environment like? At any point in a person's ongoing recovery, those are the 6 dimensions that ASAM talks about. And there's probably some professional people who say, I don't really like those 6, but they're the only thing we've got. Mm-hmm. Nobody else has put up. Let's say you're working in one treatment center for one reason or another. It could be a person changes their level of care, and they come to see me. But the only thing that changes is the intensity of care.
Mm-hmm.
Again, intensity is always determined by symptoms. It's that way with any other acute or chronic disease. We tend to make time frame. You need to go somewhere for a month.
Right.
Well, when you and I, everybody went somewhere for a month. I mean, everybody had the same treatment.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll tell you, people like yourself and myself, I do believe we've helped a lot of people along the way. People who work in treatment centers. But I think I just kind of wonder how many people we've turned away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, and our job is to attract people.
Exactly. So actually, maybe you can get get it across that as long as you remain in the process of getting well, you're still okay.
Something occurs to me that is one of the factors that really, really complicates this. Because I'm listening to you talk about, basically we're talking about length of stay in residential treatment, or how long you need to have care, and how we package it in 30-day increments or whatever. Part of the reason I think that we continue to do that is because, and I heard this very early on, is this is the only disease where you kind of have to diagnose yourself.
I'm not sure about that.
But it's not like your arm is severed off.
Right.
And often we have to convince people they need help.
But you talk about changes in language. The Associated Press, you probably know this, they have a style guide that they put out every year. And they, tell them, what's the...
So does the APA, by the way.
Right. I liked the Associated Press style guide. The language that I'm talking about is there. Like, they don't use the word alcoholic. A person could have a substance use disorder.
Right.
That sounds a lot different, I don't know. I guess we all agree that it's a chronic disease. Maybe we could all get into a room and say, okay, how can we do what we do better?
Right.
And I do think perceiving yourself as a person who's in treatment, the treatment centers like I've worked for, and perhaps yourself, they kind of used Alcoholics Anonymous became their farm system. Alcoholics Anonymous were supposed to provide the long-term nourishment.
Mm-hmm.
It's a hell of a responsibility to put on Alcoholics Anonymous. Mm-hmm. And like I said, diabetics have support groups, but they also have professional checkups.
Right.
And I think we deserve both. I've thought, and in fact, Terry and I were talking about this. Maybe we've accepted less than the best because we perceive ourselves as less than the best.
Mm.
Why is it so hard for us to say we need treatment, lifespan, just like the person with diabetes, the person who has cancer, the person who has... We deserve it.
Yeah.
But somehow, we've fallen short some. But then again, we've been around as a treatment entity for 100 years maybe? All these other things, So maybe we got some catching up to do.
Well, we're still pretty new.
Exactly.
We're still pretty new.
Exactly.
I mean, I think most of what we look at as modern day treatment facilities, the earliest they started was the mid to late 40s.
That's true.
I know Hazelden started in 49.
Right.
I think there are a couple places that started around 45, 46 that aren't as well known or may not be around anymore.
Yeah.
But it's a new
field.
It's a new field. And you know what occurs to me as we're talking about this, and I'm kind of smiling, is, it is getting better.
Yeah, it is.
And it always has been getting better.
Correct.
And it's because, guys like you and me show up and end up getting better.
Yeah.
And at some point think, God damn it, I can do better than this.
Exactly.
And then go do it.
I know.
I mean, I'm thinking of, there's one guy that comes to mind very quickly for me who was a client of mine close to 13, 15 years ago.
Yeah.
And he's got a fantastic facility of his own.
Oh, wow. Great.
Come on. You have people like that, too,
of course.
who you've worked with.
Well, hell, I'm like that
start
a little
great
bit.
Programs.
I never left treatment.
Yeah,
I've been doing it for 30 years.
Yeah.
It's kind of like I'm the person that never left.
Yeah.
Maybe some others are like that, too.
Yeah, but that attitude of, what, people deserve better, and I can do better than this.
Exactly.
The best treatment facilities out there, they don't start because a guy says, "Oh man, I could make money doing this."
No.
They start because somebody's pissed off because it's not good enough.
Right.
And they have passion and they say, "Damn it, I'm going to do better than this."
I just thought I'll give Karen a plug. They have my first year in recovery program. It's really, really good. I'm not sure if you're familiar with them, but
No.
they keep people engaged. At least that first year, they keep it. It depends on where the person is. Might depend upon how they do it, but they really engage either one-on-one sessions or perhaps telemed or something like that. That my first year in recovery seems like a really good program to me. It's kind of, maybe they need to change it to this is the rest of my life in recovery, but the concept is a really good one. I'll tell you what, I think people running Karen or Banyan, or it costs a lot of money. And I guess what's happening, I think, maybe it's a whole bunch of, it's the way medical care is, elite people have access to the best care.
Yeah.
That's true. And,
well, something that I've said many times over the years is that the really sad thing about addiction treatment is it's really a business of the haves and the have-nots.
Well,
it is.
Yeah.
And over the last 10 years, more people have been able to access treatment with insurance.
Yeah.
Still doesn't mean it's great treatment.
Oh, that's
the best
true.
treatment. Those facilities, a lot of them don't even take insurance.
I know.
And it's a cash pay to the tune of somewhere around $40,000 for the first month.
At
in
least.
A lot of cases.
Oh, that's
come on.
It's more
like
money
who
than
can
that.
afford to do that?
Very few people.
Most people who suffer from a substance use disorder in this country cannot afford to do this. And like where I grew up in central Indiana, like the places where those people go, that they call treatment facilities, they keep you for 3 days to detox you. They may or may not put you on Suboxone.
You're right.
And they send you off.
I know.
Because
It's
the
horrible.
insurance stopped paying.
I know.
That's what determines the length of stay. Oh, well, the insurance isn't paying anymore.
But you know something? What I'm talking about, what we're talking about, is really designed to keep people out of a residential level.
Right.
And we've both been around treatment centers for a long time. And for some, they'll keep track of a person who's been abstinent for a year, 2 years. As soon as they pick up, they're right back in residential.
Right.
And that's crazy. You got to say, what are the symptoms? What do you need? But it is true. Our world is clearly changing. People, people who have access get a very high level of care, and probably for a longer time.
Yeah.
Longer lengths of residential care. The drug cocktails people are taking today, I mentioned Seaside. Let's say I run into a 60-year-old person who's been drinking for 30 years, benzos for 20, and opiates for the last 10. You think that person's going to be detoxed in 5 to 7 days? Hell no. They're not even going to be, the culture, the using culture has changed, and maybe the treatment culture has to change with it,
Yeah. Well, another thing that has kind of changed in the industry over the last, I don't know, I guess it's close to 15 years now, where the whole, the whole sober coach thing came about, which, has been met with a lot of skepticism over the years. And I think that's diminishing.
I do too.
And I can honestly say, I'm a substance abuse counselor.
Right.
I've been also trained as a sober coach.
Right.
Which it wasn't the same kind of training. It was coaching training.
Oh yeah.
It was not
people
clinical.
are getting good training. I know that.
But it was different. But I didn't really understand the benefit of sober coaching until I started doing it. Till I started doing it, and I realized, you know what? I'm hanging out with this guy. I'm encouraging him.
Right.
I'm helping him see his maladaptive patterns in life. encouraging, telling him, you can do this.
That's right.
You can do this. And a lot of times we need to hear that.
Right.
You know, I mean, I was thinking,
oh, yeah.
You know, today I was thinking about, you know, right before I got sober, there was a conversation I had with my dad.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll never forget it. It was, he's sitting next to me and he's trying to get me to stop drinking.
Right.
Because listen, you got to go back to work in a few days. You got to get your strength back up, you know.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And I had been drinking for 2 weeks solid.
Wow. Yeah.
As a 23-year-old kid.
Wow.
And, you know, he's trying to talk to me. And I'm talking to him about, you know, I'm an alcoholic.
Yeah.
I'm an alcoholic.
Huh.
And he looked at me and said, do you really think you're an alcoholic?
That's right. Yeah.
He didn't want to believe that because there is a stigma associated with being an alcoholic. But the other thing is he didn't know, probably because he didn't get it from his dad.
Right.
He didn't know what I would know to say to my son,
Right.
which is, it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
You can do this.
That's true.
It's going to get better.
I actually often say we can do it because I do, you know, the bond between a person being healed, between a therapist and a whole group. Or even if people continue in treatment, it's a we thing.
Yeah.
And you talked about, you know,
The belonging thing.
the belonging. Let me tell. There's a kind of interesting what you said. When I went to my first SMART meeting, I was coaching a guy who wouldn't go to AA.
Mm-hmm.
And I said to him, well, would you go to SMART? And he agreed. That was my first SMART meeting, which is kind of a strange way to come about.
Right.
It was, I thought it was somebody might choose to do SMART or Refuge in addition to or instead of 12-step.
Mm-hmm.
Because I work with SMART, I do more SMART meetings now, but I miss the stories. And I also miss when we hold hands at the end. Mm-hmm. So there are some things that I can get from SMART, but there's something that I really cherish about the years I've spent in 12-step recovery. More choices, I think, is probably a good thing.
But if you drill down on what you're talking about, that what you're missing is connection. Because the stories make you feel connected.
Right.
The prayer at the end of the meeting where you hold it, that makes you feel connected to the other human beings in that room. And so which brings me to something else that really kind of drives me crazy about our industry, which, you know, I guess sometimes, I don't know, I can be an idealist.
Yeah. There needs to be idealists.
Yeah. So here's a question that I find myself asking. Okay, so we're talking about how to help one person at a time.
Right.
That's basically what you and I do.
Correct.
We help one person at a time. When, as an industry, are we all going to put our heads together and say, there's a big problem here that is creating all these people who are heartsick?
Right.
What is a society are we going to start doing different? Because we have all these scores and scores of people whose lives are so devoid of meaning.
That's right.
That they choose to kill themselves slowly.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what it is. The lack of connection, lack of meaning. I mean, look at how materialistic we are as a society. More.
That's right.
I mean, everything's about more. Everything's about better.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, we work too much.
That's true.
We don't sleep enough.
I know.
You know, I mean, we don't take care of ourselves. That's
the society we live in.
It's really more about quantity than it is about quality.
I think you're right.
So what is the answer? What are we going to do?
I don't think we're going to find the answer this afternoon.
No, I don't either.
But I mean,
somebody needs to start posing the question, you know?
Well, change takes time. I went to an ASAM conference several years ago, and there was a man named Dr. Seldy, I believe his name was. But he got an award from ASAM for being the best educator of the year. I mean, this guy's the best educator about addiction. The guy gets up there and he says, from the time there's a change, from the time there's something new or a new way of looking at things, he said for it to go from where it starts to be commonplace, it takes 40 years. I almost walked out. I don't have 40 years, you know what I mean? Yeah. But it's helpful in a way because, you know, we try to do the right thing. I guess as long as, you know, if we do the right thing without getting stuck by the old and not be open to change, I think one of the the person who really had, Bill White is who I'm thinking of. Mm-hmm. Now, Bill White is, I mean, he's like talks about things in a long-term way. Yeah. You know, and he really in favor of getting the shame out of addiction. Mm-hmm. Bill White talks more about the sober home area, where Michael Botticelli and David May-Lee might be talking about the more traditional treatment areas, right, like residence. But you know, well,
and Bill White, a lot of what he talks about is community stuff.
Exactly. I almost wish SMART does not say that. I wish they didn't say that spirituality is not part of the program, because a couple of times a week, I sit in a room, and let me tell you, there's something in that room that wouldn't be happening if there was only one person there. Right. Spiritual connections are important. The thing that I never liked the part of AA that, you know, started with the Serenity Prayer. I like the Serenity Prayer. But somebody would tell me something like, well, don't worry, AA is spiritual, it's not religious. Well, how do we start the meeting? God, grant me, you know. Words, how do we end the meetings? Yeah, you're going to tell somebody that's not religious? But you know something, I kept going. I mean, I just met plenty, you know, if you can't find people that you connect with at an AA meeting, I don't care what your beliefs are, you're the problem. I mean, you really are. Yeah. People who just do SMART and are not willing to do AA, I'm not sure they're willing to go to any lengths yet. But, you know, during this hurricane, there's a SMART group I go to. It usually has anywhere between, I don't know, maybe 10 to 20 people. The number of people that got called and were informed that the meeting was canceled because it was absolutely unbelievable. I mean, just like this person, everybody. Now, that's a spiritual connection. SMART would call it that. But, you know, the couple of groups we've got going, they're tight. Mm-hmm. And that's spiritual. Yeah. However...
well, and I think I talked to you about this when we talked a couple weeks ago, is the definition of spirituality that I like, right, that I use which was, you know, I'm stealing from Jerry Singleton.
Oh, of course.
Stealing
is good.
It is. Spirituality is about relationships.
Right.
It's about my relationship with myself.
Right.
My relationship with others,
right, and
my relationship with my creator, sure, or the nature or whatever it is that you identify. Right. But that's what spirituality is. It is. It's relationships.
And somebody, exactly, because somebody put it to me in a slightly different way. To be spiritual, you have to reach outside of yourself for something. It's like you have to say, it's more than you. And that's the same as relationships. Yeah. I mean, you got to reach out to, you know, something, no matter how much I talk about this lifespan and how we might need a change, it's very hard for me to imagine a person being isolated and doing recovery. Just I have a hard time getting that, you know?
Yeah. Well, we get lost in ourselves.
Yeah.
We need other people. We need our reflection.
We do.
From other people to know who we are.
You know, one thing, but if you just study human behavior, period, we hang out in groups.
Yeah.
We're not isolated beings. We hang out in groups. We either go steady, get engaged, or be married. It's one of those things, you know. Or you could be just. We're all about relationships, and I just think a guy coming into treatment said, "I don't have any spirituality." I might say to this person, "Well, what's the reason you're here?" And very often the person might say, "Well, I'm here because I need help." Well, if you're reaching out for help, that might be your first spiritual gesture. And so the thing that the person who thinks they don't have spirituality, they had enough to get them help. That's a start.
Yeah, and I think as a culture, we have this narrow definition of spirituality, which really amounts to religion. Yeah. But it really is a lot bigger than...
Yeah. If you could ever get a hold of the ASAM criteria, they did an incredible job of describing certain types of things. And they even have a definition of spirituality that's livable. I mean, a lot of people are going to disagree with it. But one thing they did, they put it out there. And I'll get that to you when I see, or I'll set it over to you. See, that's I'll email it to you, right, so we do things faster, and better.
Yeah, you're used to the snail mail days still?
Yeah. I mean, it's like I had an article with a fellow named Charles Smith in the I think it was in the August issue of the Sober World. And I really love that publication because it gets to people who need to read it. But this article was more about adapting to change than it was about addiction per se. Adapting to change, you know, the change is happening so fast. How do you slow it down? Mm-hmm. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that it's taken me a long time to conclude, but this kind of goes back to the whole shame thing associated with addiction. There's a lot of investment in the idea that there's something wrong with me.
Yeah, that's right.
Because I have an addiction. There's something wrong with me. Right. And it's really hard not to hang on to that. But man, what I've concluded is that, as human beings, we all have a certain amount of suffering that we experience.
Oh, yeah.
It's part of the human condition, part of the human experience. All of us find our own way to manage that suffering. And,
that's a good way to look.
And myself, the way I learned to manage my suffering was drinking. And I think that's it's a way to try to manage distress. And I had people tell me when I was in treatment, I had to stop drinking because it stopped working. Yeah. At one time it worked, then it stopped. Yeah. And that was my experience. It didn't work anymore.
It took me a while to get there, but I did too.
But that's really so. Which brings me to, the things that we need to learn how to do in order to be sober are really just things that we need to learn how to do in order to live.
I agree with that. And, sometimes at a meeting, when somebody says, I don't know anything, I'm powerless over everything, I kind of find it a little disheartening because I do think I'm not sure I need Alcoholics Anonymous to live. I certainly need a recovery to help live as well as I possibly can.
Mm-hmm.
But you talk about some people, and you talked about well-to-do people, let's say, or highly educated people. They could easily get turned off at a 12-step meeting when somebody says, "I don't know anything." Well, he does know something. It's like,
well,
it's like a degradation that you're talking
there's
about.
this whole self-deprecating
Exactly.
sort of language, which one of the questions I've posed to myself over the last couple years, how long do I really need to call myself an alcoholic?
I don't call myself an alcoholic.
I don't either, really.
I have a substance use disorder.
Yeah,
that's a big difference. And people, when I refer to the associated, more and more newspaper language and magazine language, the language which gets to everyone.
Right.
Because of the Associated Press, people are really starting to use substance use disorder. And it feels different.
Yeah.
The guy I was telling you about before, who I said been to treatment 4 times, and I'm explaining to him, not really. Had you just had a really, maybe not the best of experiences, maybe not the best advice, or maybe you just didn't do it. But you're not talking about 4 failures. You're talking about treating the same disease going forward. And let me tell you, if you try talking to a person like that, you can see a lot of the shame just lift, The research that you look at, in fact, I tell this to, you might use this in group too. I'd say to a group of people who are paying a lot of money to be in treatment, and I'd say to them, let's all get an estimate. What do you think, what percentage of people do you think are in treatment who are going to be abstinent in a year? They come up with 20%, 10%, 30%. Where I was working, I could say, you're telling me that you're shelling out $60,000 for this month, and you think the probability of you not drinking is 10 to 20%? Something wrong with that picture.
Right.
But if you show them the data, it could be the doctor data, it could be the pilot's data. There's some data done with DUI people or probation people that when you start treating it as a chronic disease, it works.
Right.
I mean, Lou Baxter is a good friend of mine up in New Jersey. 90-some-odd% of the doctors he works with get back to practicing. But they see it it's just the doctors, like I said, they perceive they're in treatment.
Right.
Is it perceiving that you're in treatment for 5 years the critical factor? Or is it something else that's the critical factor? But when I show people in a group, they'll say, 10%, 20% of people are going to be abstinent. Then I'll show them the data, the results when people actually follow the plan that they create.
Doctors, airline pilots who were required for 5 years.
And another guy did a study of just follow people in treatment, regular people, anybody. And of the people who followed their discharge plan, 80% of it was abstinent. They were abstinent in a year.
Yeah.
And so when I show that, people get some motivation with that. And the motivation is, look, if you do what you need to do, this works.
Absolutely.
And when they see, there's a motivational factor. You could see it in their eyes. 80% didn't drink if they just...
Well, and something you run into a lot is people don't believe it's going to work for them. They might believe it works, but they don't believe it's going to work for them. Hopelessness.
Exactly. But that's also, when I say we do outcome data, not looking at whether or not a person is still involved, but whether or not they actually drank it within a year, we kill ourselves with that. You have a person that haven't drank in 8 months, they pick up and you can't count them as a success. Something wrong with that. Yeah. And we kill ourselves. We do that to ourselves. Yeah. I don't know. It's just going to take a little while, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's ultimately it's about treating people with love and treating ourselves with love.
That's true.
And, one of the things that comes to mind in this whole, conversation about not judging,
right,
not shaming, is, in the 12-step community, there was a guy who I used to see around for many, many years.
Right.
Who, one of the things he would say, here we don't shoot our wounded.
Yeah, that's true.
We don't shoot our wounded.
Yeah.
And this is hard.
It's hard. But I think it's doable. I do think.
Of course.
The more a podcast, the podcasts you do with some, really neat people, messages go out.
Yeah.
And people listen. It's kind of like one of the things I've learned is that the only person I have any control over is me.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm trying to do what I can about getting the word out about, and I like Sober World and publications that get to, people like us,
Well, and it's funny because I've spoken to some people about, this podcast, the path to authenticity.
Right. I like that.
I mean, where it comes from is, and I think I said this in one of the earlier podcasts that I know I've written it, that ultimately when I really take a look at my life, all the bad things that happened, the real mistakes I made, were really on some level, I was either selling myself out.
Right.
I was not being true to myself.
Good point.
I was not being true to myself. And for me, I nearly drank myself to death. And I did that because I couldn't stand the way it felt to not be myself, because I was not being true to myself.
Maybe that's one of the reasons that people with addiction have so much denial. Because like yourself, I remember it a long time ago. I was a college professor. And being a good college professor was important to me. I wanted to be good. The more alcohol, the more cocaine, I was really, if I was getting by, I was lucky. So, notice the only way I could continue to perceive myself as an okay person would be I'd have to deny that what was happening to me.
Right.
Because I still wanted to be a good friend. I never showed up.
Right.
Wanted to be a good family member, but, didn't do anything.
Well, and the truth is people who aren't alcoholics or drug addicts live their lives that way all the time.
That's true. That's right.
Do.
That's
right.
There's
someone specific right now who comes to mind, just like not in reality.
Yeah.
Not in reality.
You know what I find amazing too? Like, how much when I say to a person, "Are you drinking?" they usually say yes or no. But the word drinking specifically refers to alcohol.
Yeah.
I mean, how deep in our culture is that?
Yeah. Well, and not to mention the fact that it is more people die from alcohol addiction than any other drug addiction.
Exactly.
And I mean, it's just one of the things that just baffles me at this point is, the idea that somebody would get behind the wheel of a car after having a few drinks. I mean, the longer I'm sober, the more ridiculous that sounds. I mean, why would a person do that?
But the person who does that, and I did it,
we
still want to think of ourselves as a good person. So we couldn't possibly be getting into this vehicle with a good chance of killing somebody.
Right.
We have to convince ourselves that we're okay.
Not,
my reflexes are fine. No problem. Because ordinarily, very few people would do that on purpose.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, I don't know. All in all, semi-retired. The idea of being totally retired is something I really don't understand. I don't even know if I could do it.
Mm-hmm.
I do know that, talking to you today, and, we both enjoy writing, and, I feel I've spent the better part of my life doing something that I've loved every day, that was different every day. Language is important to me. I tell people it's not that you can't drink, you choose not to.
Right.
I mean, I proved to be I was good at drinking. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But to have, very few people have that, You see, look at a person who's, I don't know, working in a factory forever. And the fact that I've always had a job or an occupation it wasn't just it was who I was, just like as who you are.
Mm-hmm.
To have that has been it's been fantastic,
So I guess one more thing I'd like to hear from you before we close is, so how old were you when you got sober?
I was 37 or 38, something like that.
What now, knowing what you know now, what would you tell that guy who's, day one?
Day one, well, I would never, some things I won't tell him. I might say to him, look, you don't have to think about not drinking forever.
Right.
I mean, just, that is a choice. Let's say you do this and, life's going good, you might choose to stick with it. If it's not going good, you could always choose to go back. I would tell that about choice. I would never tell anybody that I'm never going to drink again, because that's hard work. Telling someone I'm not going to drink today is a lot easier. Mm-hmm. And I would get rid of that. The words alcoholic and addict, they've got to go. I mean, people do feel differently about a substance use disorder. The word relapse and relapse prevention have to go in favor of disease management or recovery management. It just makes more sense. And I would actually tell that person, look, you don't, if it was me, I more or less had to go to treatment to save my job. Mm-hmm. But a person like me can think, okay, look, you do this for your job for now, but see what happens. Maybe if things get better. The absolutes I don't like. Mm-hmm. Never drink again.
Yeah.
Like you said, a 26-year-old kid. Crazy.
Yeah.
So I would do things I would do whatever I can to get the shame out of it. I try not to use words like, are you clean? Because it just kind of means the other day you were dirty.
Right.
I don't like first treatment, second treatment, or when I was in treatment. Mm-hmm. That changes things. That's a biggie. I do think the word relapse, it sets up an expectation, because most people will think of relapse as you're off and running.
Right.
Picking up again could be a drink on a weekend.
Right.
And it doesn't have to be the shame associated with it. Sometimes I think people who are off and running, they kind of know what a relapse is supposed to be. So they're going to go do it. You know what I mean?
Well, there's like one of the things I've always thought about in 12-step meetings that you hear, one of those slogans that you hear, which keep coming back.
Yeah, keep coming back.
Keep coming back.
Right.
And they're not saying keep coming.
Right.
They're saying keep coming back.
Wow, that's an interesting thought.
Keep coming back. Because and you think about it, when you stick around, a lot of people don't stay. A lot of people don't stay. But hopefully they come back.
Well, not only that, I mean, has there ever been a time in your life, since getting sober, that recovery or being a member of Alcoholics Anonymous wasn't important? And it's kind of like in 30-something years, there's been times when I've gone a week or not a week, maybe to go to a meeting in a couple of months, but I never changed my thinking. I mean, I always felt like in this place I lived, I was part of a recovering community. Right. I always knew that going to a meeting would be a good idea.
Right.
And I never forget so much that I've learned from the people. I think, keep coming back is pretty damn important. But even at times when I didn't really go to meetings, I still felt a part of it, if that's
right.
You know what I mean?
Well, to me, it's, and that's another thing, people get shamed for not going to meetings.
Right. I know. That's true.
Time. But, what I try to tell guys is, you're going to go through your ups and downs.
That's life.
And for me, what I've never done is not looked at myself like someone who needs that.
Yeah.
I never stopped thinking, I don't need that anymore.
Yeah, right.
Never went there in my brain.
Right. That's a good point.
And it's a partially humility.
Yeah, humility is important.
But there's also a little bit of fear that's still lingering, that because I know how bad it can be.
Oh yeah. Wow.
And I don't I don't want it. I don't want it. I use the same sort of thing that you do. Like, it's not that I can't drink.
Yeah, I know.
I choose not to because I don't want the results. I have a pretty good idea of what would happen, and I've built a life for myself where, it would devastate my son.
Yeah.
It would, my employment would be, status would change.
Yeah.
Pretty immediately. I mean, my life is built around sobriety and helping people, and I like it. I like it.
Come to think of it, even during those times when I didn't go to a meeting, I never said I wasn't going to go. I let usually things like work interfere with it.
Right.
But like you said, when you said you're part of something and belong, I was never away from the community, more or less. Like, let's say I'd run into yourself, or run into Terry or other people we know. And, I guess I'd been going for some time before I kind of got a little lax. But I've always thought of myself as a person in recovery.
Mm-hmm. And
that might be what you mean by coming back. If you lose that,
I
don't know.
Well, when I brought that up, I mean, to me, that keep coming back thing, it implies compassion that, you know what, you might get lost, but come back.
Yeah, that's
You're
a good
welcome
one.
here.
I like that. Yeah, that's very true.
Well, listen, Michael, this has been a blast.
Yeah.
I really appreciate you
taking the time. Actually, thanks for the tea.
No problem.
I don't think I had too many coughing episodes.
No, not at all.
But it's, like I said, if I'm probably going to write something a little later. I mean, it's just, sometimes my wife, she'll say, you got to stop working. As you know, when I get an idea, I'm at a computer and writing, that's not work.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It's something, it comes from a different place.
Yeah, it does. It's not work.
It does. And I feel the same way about this.
Yeah.
What we're doing right now. I mean, I kind of go into a different gear.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like work.
That's true. This is great.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you enjoyed it.
This is great. You mean you get paid to do this?
Not yet, but I hope we get
But
there.
what a gift.
Yeah, thank you.
To do the work we really cherish.
Absolutely.
That's fantastic.
Thanks for listening to The Path to Authenticity. If you'd like to learn more about our guest, you can find links in the show notes or visit our website at thepathtooauthenticity.com. If you're interested in becoming a sponsor, if you have a suggestion for a topic, or you know someone who would make a great guest, email the show at thepathtooauthenticity@gmail.com. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review on Apple Podcasts. If you know someone else who would enjoy the show or even just a particular episode, please share it with them. Every little bit helps. If you're not already a subscriber, please consider becoming one wherever it is you choose to listen. You can find the show on Patreon, where by becoming a patron, you can hear episodes before they're released publicly. You can gain access to supplemental content. There are other benefits in the various tiers. Visit patreon.com/thepath-to-authenticity. Join our Facebook community or follow the show on Instagram, both at The Path to Authenticity. We also have a YouTube channel. You can connect with us on Twitter or Pinterest. To hear the songs from this and every episode, you can find the Path to Authenticity playlist on Spotify. Obviously, there are a lot of ways you could be spending your time, so I appreciate you spending some of it here with me. I'm Tom Gentry. Thanks for listening. Be nice.
Great, honeybee.
The Path to Authenticity is powered by Equivox. For digital marketing and web design services, visit equivox.com.